Greetings, social media land. This is Ted Victor, founder of the Broward Social Network. Today is Tuesday, August the 11th at approximately 7 p.m. We are here today with former Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel. Mr. Israel, for the sake of this interview, 1 week before the big election, how may I refer to you? Scott, Mr. Israel? Okay, awesome. Scott, how are you doing at this moment? Please talk to me. Where are you in terms of coming from the last week before the elections? Please talk to us.
I'm doing well. I need to pass a link on before we go. Is there a link that I could pass on? Because we have a lot of people that want to come and join in and watch. How do I do that?
Let me go ahead and send you the link right now.
Thank you.
That is an easy fix. Let's see. And you have the link now. You ready?
Yes.
So there you go.
You texted it to me, right? I got it.
You got it?
Yes.
All right. So we're in business.
Hold on. Just give me. Okay, I'm ready to go.
Awesome. So considering that it's 1 week before the big day, talk to us in general before we get to some specific questions. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm feeling great. All glory to God. I had COVID for a few weeks, and it was all fever. Thank God no lungs or anything like that. And then I had to go in the hospital for 2 days, and the fever went from 104 to 97, and the doctors and nurses were good. God was great, and I'm out of the hospital, negative test, and I feel great. I'm healthy. I'm out. I'm working out, and 100%.
Well, considering that you were taking precautions, how do you think this happened?
No idea. I absolutely have no idea. And I was lying in the hospital bed thinking how this happened, and I'm saying, if this happened to me and I couldn't have taken more precautions, what about these kids that are 15, 20, 25, and they feel they're invincible? And I just hope that, they wise up and understand how it is a terrible virus. Most people will get over it, but it does, take the lives of some people. And we have to be incredibly, incredibly careful.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. All right, so let's get down to business. Where are you in terms of getting the word out, in terms of making sure that the people remember to vote for Scott Israel? Where are you? What are your thoughts? What do you need to tell to the voters? Because hundreds, if not thousands of people in Broward County will see this interview. I'm not sure what your schedule is, but this may be the last opportunity you get to speak to a large audience before the election. So what is on your mind, and what do you say to the voters?
Well, it probably will be the last opportunity to speak to a large audience. You're incredibly correct. The word has gotten out. As you well know, we've had almost, or maybe we're even over 100,000 Democratic ballots have been mailed back in VBM. Early voting is slow, and that's expected because we have a county called Broward who's educated, informed, and they don't want to risk COVID. So very few people are going out there, but it's not stopping the votes from coming in. And I think the votes will continue to come in VBM. So I think we've done a good job of getting the word out. Since my suspension, there is a small little hamlet in northern Broward that a few people up there have, said in Parkland have, not been, they've been upset with the situation, and they haven't been supportive. But throughout Broward County, the Democratic, our fellow Democrats have not left me. They've been so supportive, so loving. They understand what happened to me should have never happened. They understand it was a Republican conspiracy. And I think you're going to see that reflected, Ted, in the votes, throughout since the the vote by mails have come in. And, finally, I think I feel very confident that Tuesday night will be a win for our team. And we have a lot of our team watching tonight, and Our team is smaller than in other years, but they work so hard, tirelessly. They're together. And to those members of the team watching tonight, you know who you are. I appreciate you and thank you.
Okay, I'm in a unique position when it comes to what I do and what I bring to the table to social media. Scott, I happen to also be a teacher in the classroom, and I always have access to a fresh batch of young minds, a brand new batch of voters who are coming into the platform to vote for people, young kids. How long have you been sheriff in Broward County? Talk about that a little bit. And maybe a lot of the audience members already know this, but there are some new people in Broward County. I'd like for you to be able to introduce yourself, which may not be necessary, but introduce yourself all over again to the people who are going to potentially vote for you next week.
Well, my name is Scott Israel. I'm proud of my family. I have an incredible wife. We've been married almost 30 years. We have triplets. They're 23 years old. Best children in the world. We're so proud of them. Brett, Blake, and Blair. And I became a police officer in 1979 with the Fort Lauderdale Police Department. I rose through the ranks and retired after 25 years. I became the chief of police of North Bay in Dade County. And I eventually ran for, won the sheriff's race in 2012. And I was inaugurated in January of 2013. We had a great, the agency had a great first 4 years. We didn't make a lot of promises, Ted. We didn't say we were going to do 100 things. We focused on 3 or 4 things. The agency was abundantly successful with these 3 or 4 things. The most important thing in the community, the listeners know this, was, I brought the motto, we'll measure our success by the kids we keep out of jail, not the kids we put in jail. And through civil citation and our initiatives, not only do we keep children out of jail and give them second and third chances, we reduced violent crime at the same time. Having been a SWAT commander and having been a captain of community policing, I had such a diversified career that I was able to take advantage of leaders I knew and tactics and strategy that I knew, and we went ahead and we put it into place, and we reduced violent crime. And the critics said, you can reduce violent crime, but not while keeping juveniles out of jail. But we did it. We kept young people out of jail, reduced violent crime, and we were so successful with our civil citation program that representatives in this county who were Democrat were able to go to a Republican entrenched Tallahassee and get the civil citation program bumped from 1 citation to 3 citations. So now kids could have 3 bites of the apples. And we were so successful, we got reelected by the largest margin ever and got almost 600,000 votes in 2016 to get reelected, which was Broward County's way of saying, well done, BSO. You've made us safe and you've enhanced our quality of life.
So, Scott, I'm going to ask you for a favor, considering, again, I'm going to replay this recording and it's going to be also seen by my students. And I'm going to ask you, because we know that kids make mistakes. We know that. What is a civil citation for a young person who may be 18 years old, who probably, I don't know, maybe shoplifted and doesn't really understand what that means? What does that mean?
Wow, what a great opportunity. I really appreciate this, man. You can tell you're a teacher. Thank you. To all Mr. Victor's students who listen to this, a civil citation program is a state program. It's in Florida state statute. It's not a program Scott Israel created. It's not a BSO program. It's a state program. And it basically says that if a police officer sees a juvenile commit a misdemeanor,
under the age of 18, or does that include 18-year-olds?
No.
When you say juvenile, define the juvenile.
The day you become 18 years old, you are not
adult.
Eligible. You're an adult.
Okay.
So it's,
all right.
It's
very
one
good.
day before your 18th birthday and backwards.
Because there are several seniors who are 18 years old. So therefore, civil citation does not apply to anybody who is 18 and over. Let's make that crystal clear. So if you're going to make a mistake, if you're going to make a mistake, my fellow students and young people who are going to see this, and maybe some parents who are uninformed, this is for 17 and this is for 18 and under. Okay, if you're 17, 16, 15, and you probably want to maybe test the waters or you want to experiment with life and so forth, do it before your 18th birthday. But you don't have to do it at all. I'm not encouraging you to do it. I just want you to just make sure that you understand that once you're 18, what Scott Israel is referring to right now, former sheriff with years of experience, this does not apply to you. So do not take any liberties thinking that just because you're young, you can actually make some intentional mistakes. I just wanted to be clear about that. So thank you very much for that opportunity. Please
You're
continue.
welcome. So if a 17-year-old or a 16-year-old or younger were to commit to get in a fight where there weren't any injuries, we're not talking guns or knives. And the public who's ever listening in, these are not kids who, please don't call them bad kids. These are not kids who robbed or burglarized or committed felonies. This might be a fight after school. This might be a small amount of marijuana, a trespass, a shoplift. These are things where my things are, if you arrest the child, you give them a police record. If he or she has a police record, there's so many jobs they'll never get. They can't go into the military. They might not go into law enforcement. And we can't do this. We can't cripple a child's life because of one mistake. So my let me correct that. The state civil citation program, I was the first sheriff and maybe still the only sheriff, Ted, who made the program mandatory for my deputies. In other words, from the day I arrived at BSO students, if you committed a misdemeanor and my deputy saw it, I took the option away from them. They were not allowed to arrest. They had to put the juvenile in a civil citation program. And then the juvenile could get help with alcohol, narcotics, anger management, mental health,
Right.
If applicable.
Right, any type of program. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and we were so successful. Our state legislatures here in Broward County were able to go to Tallahassee and say, this program is working so well with the Broward Sheriff's Office. Why don't we bump it from 1 mistake to 3 mistakes? And the state voted for it. And I have so much pride in our agency. And I don't know that any police leader has done more to blow up the schoolhouse to jailhouse pipeline than myself. And now kids can make 3 mistakes and stay out of the criminal justice system. And the only question people should be asking, I'm not talking about the juveniles, but adults listening should be saying, whether they criticize it or support it, they should be saying, is the program successful? And I give you this, I'm not a big stat guy, so I'll give you this one stat and we're done for the night. The recidivism rate in Broward County is 64%.
Define that. I'm going to beg your forgiveness. You define that. Define that. Recidivism for my young people, and correct me if I'm wrong, are kids who are going in and out of jail, right? Right. Kids who go back to jail and
students. No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Students' recidivism, as Mr. Victor said, is you get out of jail, and then within a very short period of time, you go back into jail. And most times it's for the very first thing, the same thing you went in. And the recidivism rate in Broward County is about 64%. So 64% of adults who get out of jail go back into jail within a few years. The recidivism rate in the civil citation program is 4%. 96 kids who get put in the program never come back. And people ask me why, and I'm not a human behavioral specialist, so I just have a theory. And my theory is, Ted, if you and I were asked to spell the word love, spell love, you and I would spell it L-O-V-E. But many of your students wouldn't spell it L-O-V-E, they'd spell it T-I-M-E.
Yes,
so we're putting kids in programs where they have a mentor, they have a coach, and they have a way out. People are spending time with them, and they're not coming back. The program's working, and I'm so it's just a blessing that I was able to really kick this program off for being used in Broward County.
Okay, let me give you some words of encouragement. Kim Andor says, Scott Israel 2020, I'm with you, Sheriff. Okay, so many thanks to Mr. Victor for always holding a respectful and professional, what else? forum. Of course, my pleasure. So
Thank
those
you.
are words of encouragement. Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room. How did we get here? How did we get here? How did we get here? Because I don't think, and it is important for the people who, I don't know, I think everybody, even if you're living under a bridge, has heard the story. But I think it's important for the people who will see this and who are seeing this to know that you probably are the only sheriff in this country who's been removed out of office, correct?
Only one that I know of.
So how did we get here? If you don't mind telling us the story in brief, because we can talk about this for a while, because this is something that's going to make the history books.
It is. We could talk about this for hours and hours and hours, but I will be brief. And if you have any follow-up questions, there's not a question you can ask me that I won't answer. We were a very popular sheriff. We were a very popular administration. And in 2016, ladies and gentlemen, I received almost 600,000 votes to be reelected, the most votes in the history of any sheriff in Broward County. And 2 years later, it looked like we would probably be run unopposed and have a third term. And then a tragedy of monumental proportions happened.
Epic.
Stone. Epic. 34 people were shot and 17 died, most of them students, but one of them was a coach, an incredible friend of mine. I coached football with him, and a teacher, the athletic director. So it was horrific. And then for whatever reason, a group of people in Parkland got a hold of the now governor, then candidate, a Republican, and they basically said, we'll support you if you give us your word you'll suspend Sheriff Israel when you get elected. He knew nothing about the investigation, nothing about Stoneman Douglas, and he pledged months and months and months before. One of the most unfair things that could happen, he pledged to suspend me, and he won the election, and he did suspend me. Suspended because I'm a Democrat, and I, suspended because I take a stance, for sensible gun control. I don't agree with the NRA on issues, and he suspended me and appointed a Republican that was friends with a person from Parkland. And we'll talk about that later. But right now I want to finish up on Parkland. So the Senate hired a lifelong Republican, or a former Republican state representative, an attorney, and everybody told me, Democrats and Republicans in Tallahassee, this is an ethical, honorable man, and he will do this fairly, and the facts are going to be the facts. And we found out 6-7 months later that this was an ethical, honorable man, and he investigated and listened to all evidence and said there were some individual failures, but there were no failures on the part of Sheriff Israel. There was nothing systemic within the agency. Put the sheriff back to work. He said, he told the Senate, he told the governor, there were the training, the equipment, the policies I provided were industry standard. And I'll say one more thing before I turn it back to you. What's important to note is there was one officer who didn't go in, who retired several days later. This officer was arrested. This officer was arrested by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement about 4 months after the tragedy. And when he was arrested, and you could pull up the affidavit online and read it yourself, Ted. But in the affidavit, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the investigative body for our governors, said you had to the arrested former deputy, you had the training, you had the equipment, and you were governed by the policies and procedures that should have directed you to do A, B, C, and D. You didn't go in, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, and we arrest you for negligence. Now, the agency that I led, we provided him with those policies, procedures, and training. So how does it make sense that you could tell a deputy that you had all the required things you needed and then suspend the sheriff for not supplying with the deputy with the things that were needed? It was an injustice. And for your students out there, you should be reading about Dr. King anyway. And everybody's got their favorite Dr. King quote. Mine is that an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. And it's
Correct.
our job, yours, mine, and every voter to say, Tallahassee, we're voting for Sheriff Israel. We're reclaiming our vote. And when we don't want Sheriff Israel in, we'll vote him out. But we have the power of the people. We are the people of Broward County, and we will decide who our elected officials are. Not one vote of a governor for one person who is not qualified to be sheriff.
Well, Scott, I infinitely support that. It is the voters who are to be able to make their decision for who is going to lead a particular seat in government. Now, as a parent, you're a parent, I'm a parent. As a parent, I do not, under any circumstances, want anyone to see this interview and think that we are being insensitive to Parkland at all. What happened was a tragedy. We ought to be mindful of that. We ought to be mindful. And myself, as a fellow high school teacher as well here in Broward County, I'm not necessarily sure there's a day that we do not necessarily have these thoughts in our minds and our thoughts and prayers for the parents and in Parkland and the Parkland community. Having said that, there are phenomena such as cyclones and hurricanes, which happen and are unpreventable. In your view, because you have experience, you were there, is this or was this something that was preventable?
Absolutely not. The sheriff, the Republican sheriff, who is the chairman of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Commission, said that there's nothing that could have been prevented. They talked about the killer and telltale signs. There was no call the FBI or anybody in Palm Beach or BSO went out on that would have predicted anything like this. There was no arrestable offenses ever seen, or he would have been arrested. People have to understand the rifle he used to take the lives of these poor innocents during this epic, evil murder was provided to him by his mom. His own mother bought the rifle for him. This is about mental health. As President Obama said, this country needs to spend millions, if not billions of dollars more on mental health. We need to get people when they're young. But this is very interesting. A year before the tragedy at Stoneman Douglas, Mr. Victor, we had another shooting at the Fort Lauderdale International Airport. And from the time those shots rang out, 72 seconds later, a deputy by the name of Jesse Madrigal took the killer into custody. No more killings, no more injuries. He took him into custody. Same sheriff, same training, same administration, same leaders. We had we talked, some of the people said, well, the deputy didn't have, at Stoneman Douglas didn't have the training. He had everything he needed. And what this was is, and I asked people, if you could just think about this for a second. You're a school resource deputy. You're out of school. Your job is to protect the kids. And then you hear a semi-automatic rifle fire. He was scared. And there are other deputies and police officers at the Broward Sheriff's Office, Coral Springs, New York, Chicago. I don't know the numbers. I will just say a high percentage of the men and women I work with would have went in less than a second and run towards danger. But there are people in every profession. He was scared and he didn't go in. It was a courage issue, not a training issue. And there's nothing any sheriff, any leader, any general, or any president could have done to prevent that.
Okay, so here's an uncomfortable question for me, for you, and for the audience. And, we have COVID now, which is a separate conversation. Is this something that can potentially happen again?
Yes. I'm not gonna come on a show like this and lose credibility by giving an untruthful answer. This is not
knowing what we know, considering that Mr. Runcie, who was also under the wire for some heat as well, with all of the measures that we've taken in place, we have a single point of entry. I can tell you, I witnessed this myself. Everybody has to have their ID on. You think something as crazy as this can possibly happen again?
It might be on a car line. It might be at a football game. God forbid. We have had terrorists use trucks to run the trucks into large groups of people. You know, we use drug like anthrax and things like that. You know, when you have what we call in police work a lone wolf killer, and you have a deranged individual who is pure evil and wants to take the lives of people, sadly, it just cannot be stopped. You could respond to it, you could mitigate it. But if you're walking down the street, can you tell who's going to walk into a movie theater and do this or not do this? That's why mental health is so important. That's why we preach, see something, say something. That's why if you have a neighbor or someone on your block that's exhibiting different behavior, and they're not the same, they used to say hi to you, you know, you want to see, you know, that doesn't mean they're committing a crime. That doesn't mean that they're, you know, a bad person. But if you see radical changes in behavior in individuals, you know, you should report it. And, you know, we're not going to make, you know, training and things like that are not going to make this country, you know, free of active killing. We have to invest millions of dollars in the mental health industry. And if I were going to stand up here, or any leader were going to stand up here and tell you that there were not going to be any more active killings, first, they would be lying. And second of all, if they say they could stop active killings, let's ask them to cure cancer and Alzheimer's disease and everything else.
Right. Hurricanes and tornadoes. Right.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. So before we change subjects, one last question on this important topic, because we can never really forget that day on Valentine's Day of all days, a couple of years ago. Hindsight, is there anything that you could have or would have done differently?
No.
Okay.
I mean, if I knew it was, you know, I, you know, put Marines there, you know, I mean, obviously, but there were no telltale signs. If there was something that could have been done, would have been done, should have been done, it would have been done. But there were no elected officials in Parkland who saw this coming. Nobody's, you know, there was nothing that just the wings of the Almighty could have stopped this.
I get it. I'm a product of New York, and no one could have foreseen 9/11, right? So I get it. There are things that unfortunately simply just happen, and it's just really not fair. It's not fair.
Right. And since this happened, we had a mass killing at a synagogue in Pittsburgh. We had a killing, you know, an active shooting in Thousand Oaks, California, where a sergeant walked through the door and lost his life immediately. And active killings haven't stopped. Yet as you in the beginning of this, you know, dialogue, you said that I'm the only sheriff
in this country. And I do need the public, to my knowledge, that is. To my knowledge, that is. And I do need the public to know that. I do need the public to know that. Okay, so your work is cut out for you, right? So, and more so for the organization, BSO. How do we regain trust?
Well, we need a new leader. I think I come into the agency having been there for a long time, having 40 plus years in law enforcement. Most of the agency knows me. They know there were no scandals. There was no corruption. They know how I live my life, and they know that, you know, I believe everybody is a boss watcher. I've never met one person who doesn't watch their boss. So I live by the core values I want others to live by. Far from a perfect person, but my involvement, the relationship I built with the community are the things I'm most proud of. Rick Party, famous media person from Broward County and now a huge radio host up in Atlanta. He coined me the People's Sheriff. It was the nicest thing anyone ever said to me, to be called the People's Sheriff. There was no community I couldn't go into. There were many listeners today who were nodding their heads. And, you know, I was visible. I was available. two quick stories I like to tell. One was I was at the Urban League, and there was a seminar there, and a woman told me that it wasn't in BSO, but she told me her son had been racially profiled by another officer in Broward County, and racial profiling, excessive force, things like that. I hope we get into talk about tonight. Not going to go on my watch, or if they do go on my watch, there will be severe punishments because Black lives do matter.
Well, I'm glad you answered that in advance because I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, no commas, no punctuations, no add-ons, nothing like that. Black lives matter, beginning and the end of the story. And I hope we get to talk in greater detail about that.
Absolutely.
But refresh my memory. What were we?
Regaining trust with the public. But you see, you kind of elaborated on that because one of the things I'd like to do, right? Let's just say, you are a sheriff in a week, right? One of the things I'd like to do, I'd like to actually set up or be part of, I'd like to be invited to be part of a citizens review board, right? Because we, the public, may not fully understand from the outside going in why certain decisions are made. Why is it that certain people are hired? Why is it that certain people are fired? Why is it that certain people are not fired because of their actions? And I'd love to be able to be part of an independent review board. And I'm not necessarily sure what that means. I don't know if that review board would have power to influence the decision of whoever's at the top.
Well, can I give you my thoughts
This is your time, of course.
I would love for you to be part of that. But let me tell you, anyone who I don't know who's interviewed on your show for sheriff candidate, but if anybody said they could make that happen, they were incredibly untruthful. And I know the current sheriff said he can make that happen.
Why do you say that?
Because there's unions involved. There are actually legal bargaining unit contracts. And we don't have an independent, a civilian review board now. People say we do, but I was the sheriff at BSO. It's not an independent review board. It's made up of civilians, and there are citizens on it, people like you, Mr. Victor, but there are also members of the union on there, members of command staff on there. So it's a conglomeration, in my mind, in the perfect world, but we need to work with you. We can't dictate to the unions because there's already a collective bargaining unit in place. You can't break a contract. You can't break the law. No judge is going to allow that. So we have to work with our unions, which I'm ready to do, and develop, in my mind, a complete civilian complaint review board. Colin Powell once said that the best indicator to predict how a man or a woman are going to perform in the future is to analyze how that man or woman had performed in the past. Right. One of the first initiatives I did, hear me out on this, one of the first initiatives I did when I became the sheriff of Broward County was to say, you know what? Our homicide unit at BSO was a crackerjack, as good as any unit, around in the state, in the country. Yet I knew in police-involved shootings, the community doesn't want police policing themselves. So I got with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement and signed an agreement, and every police shooting since the day I got there has been investigated by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. So the community believes in the investigation. Community doesn't want you investigating yourselves. And now communities, right, wrong, or indifferent, however we got there, communities, we exist for the community, not the other way around. We work for, you're my boss, not the other way around. And we need to have civilian review boards where civilians monitor the case. And Ted, I know you a long time, and you're not going to take the side of a citizen, and you're not going to take the side of a cop. You're going to take the side of the facts, and you're going to let the fact. Everybody has their own opinion and has their right to their own opinion, but nobody has a right to their own set of facts. And you and a group of people, a group of men and women like you should be getting together, honorable people who say, you know what, we're going to peel back the onion. And if the cop was wrong, we're going to recommend A, B, C, and D. And
if he was right, we're going to leave him alone. Right. Right.
And that's what I'm asking for. And that's what needs to happen. But we also need to do other things from a law enforcement perspective. And what I'm going to try and do is lead the charge and get sheriffs and police chiefs from all over the country to push forth federal legislation that says if a police officer is fired for excessive force, racial profiling, corruption, a group of violations, crimes, and a police officer is fired, he or she, their name has to go. It has to go into a national repository where they can never be a police officer again. Wish them well, go on, do something else with your life. But if you beat somebody up excessively and you use police brutality, you use racial epithets, you use things you shouldn't do in Fort Lauderdale, should you be able to be a cop in Chicago? Of course not.
Right. Now, before we move on to some topics, because I can't believe how quickly time is flying, is the relationship with the union broken? How is that?
It's not broken. First of all, the largest union within the Broward Sheriff's Office is called the FOPE, and it's made up of our incredibly courageous and great detention deputies, and it's also made up of all of our communications personnel. And the communication, Greg Tony held back hand sanitizer. He didn't give out the equipment he needed, and a lot of terrible things happened because of that. They've lost all confidence. They've never had confidence in him, but now there's no chance of being rebuilding. I have the endorsement of the largest union, the Department of Detention. I have the endorsement of the AFL-CIO and their 51 plus unions. I have the endorsement of the Sun Sentinel. The agency and the community want me to come back. So I have to rebuild that trust. The police union, we've had our issues. We had disagreements over one issue, contractual financial issues.
Understandable.
And they did what they needed to do, and they felt that they needed to have larger raises. And you want to know something? They deserve larger raises. I've never said they don't deserve larger raises, but you have 7 unions, and I believe you got to take care of. I look at it kind of as a parent with a lot of children, and you want all the lives of your children enriched. So I wanted to make sure raises were there for everybody. They disagreed. That's their right. We had an acrimonious split. But since then, we've had meetings, we've had conversations, and I think the union leadership is ready to, meet with me, and they're not gonna capitulate. They're still gonna argue hard and debate, and I'm gonna argue hard and debate. But I think they see what Greg Tony did to the agency, how he single-handedly demolished. He's the only sheriff that doesn't have the endorsement of one union. Not one union. How could you lead when your people don't want to be led by you? So I think we'll be able to work together. Many of the unions already support me, but I feel good about it.
Okay, we'll talk about the incumbent in a few minutes, and we're going to talk about trust before we get there a little bit more. Now, we have something else in common, Scott. We both belong to groups who's been discriminated upon, right?
Yes.
So you are Jewish American, correct?
Yes.
I am Hispanic, African American. And so I believe when you are members of groups who've experienced persecution, I believe there is a sensitivity to what it means to feel community pain. So as a person who's been sheriff in Broward County, talk about racial profiling, talk about the manifestation, talk about George Floyd, talk about Black Lives Matter, because sometimes, and I have to put this out there, and some may disagree with me, sometimes people of color feel that, people who are visibly of color, Black people, feel that we are the only people who experience discrimination. There have been other communities who experience pain as well, Hispanic communities, Native American communities, Jewish communities who experience pain as well. And the silver lining, in my opinion, is an opportunity for us to come together, considering that we have experiences in pain and discrimination. Talk about what it means to lead a county so diverse as Broward, and at the same time trying to make sure that all lives matter in this county.
Okay, well, what a question and what an opportunity. First of all,
By the way, pardon me for interrupting. We have to have this conversation, Scott, because considering who's going to vote, white people, Hispanic people, Black people are going to vote, and we absolutely must, I don't care who it is, we must have somebody who's going to, because this is the most important seat in the county. It is the most important seat in the county. I actually have to have faith in you to not just vote for you, but to make sure that I am safe, to make sure that Lourdes is safe, to make sure that Hispanics are safe, to make sure that Jewish Americans are safe, to make sure that white people are safe. So go ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting.
First of all, I don't know if Lourdes is listening in tonight, but if she is, I love you. You're such a good friend. So
we both love her. We both love her. She's here. She's with us.
Oh, she is. Okay. Because I can't see on my screen. You know, Dr. King said, we as the either immigrants or the descendants of immigrants, we all came here on different ships.
Right.
But we're in the same boat now.
That's right.
And we got to be all in together. As far as racial profiling, I started before to tell you, I was at the Urban League and a lady was complaining about racial profiling. And, you know, and I'm nodding my head in agreement. And another lady from Lauderdale Lake stood up and says, "Don't blame that sheriff," she said. "Before he got here, our kids ran away from the cop cars. Now they run towards them." Because I am from New York. I am from a melting pot like you. I did come from I am part of a heritage of people who were persecuted. So I know what that, you know, I know what that's like from the stories. I've heard stories about concentration camps. You hear stories about slavery and it just breaks your heart and rips you apart. So right. I'm going to do everything I can to, you know, to make sure people's rights are never violated. And you know, it starts out, my dad said one thing: get out of a police car. He said, yeah, you got to bring your radio and your gun belt with you, but bring dignity and respect, and everything else will take care of itself. Absolutely. So I treat people with dignity and respect, and this community knows that. You know, so it's going to be easier for me than most leaders to bring that trust back, because the community already trusts me. 600,000 people voted for me, and they look differently from each other. You know, there's not a community where I don't have incredible relationships with people, true relationships with people. Right. George Floyd. George Floyd shook me to the core because of COVID. You know, there's a lot of bad from COVID, all bad. It's a virus, but, you know, some good has come out of it. You know, one is that the surveys show that parents are spending 35 to 38% more time with their children. So, you know, I was with my whole family and we watched the murder. It shook me to the core as a dad. It could have been my child. As a dad, as a man, as a police officer. It was horrific. It's still horrific. And I think, obviously, what bothered me the most is the same thing that bothered America. We watched a man unjustly lose his life on TV. But after you got past the murder, what bothered me, the really shook me to the core as a police officer, is when Chauvin was killing Floyd, he wasn't caught on a hidden camera. It wasn't in the dark of night where somebody looked out their window and caught him on a cell phone video. He did it in the light of day. He thought it was okay. There was a culture of systemic racism to think that you could do that, be a police officer. He knew he was being filmed. Right. So
didn't care.
So I know there's a lot of work to be done from that perspective. And we're going to look at our policies, and we know, you know, I brought the policies over to the Broward Sheriff's Office, but we're going to tear them apart. We're going to peel back the onion, and we're going to make sure that every policy is fair to people, that every police officer, every firefighter, every detention deputy, every civilian has the same right to get him promoted or transferred as everyone else. You know, and then Black Lives Matter. So I was probably present since the Floyd killing of about 7 Black Lives Matter marches. And I listened to the leaders at each march. I was just a participant in the march. I wasn't a speaker. And all the leaders had megaphones. And these are things you would hear. And what solidifies this is, Ted, about 5 days ago in Newsweek, a Gallup poll was published. and African Americans were surveyed across our nation, and over 80% of African Americans said, we want more police protection. We want more saturation about police. When Black Lives Matter protested, when I go into African American communities, I know this, they're pro-law enforcement. Minority communities aren't against police, never have, never will. I know the way they treated me. Communities just says, Black Lives Matter is saying, we want police, we love our police. We won't accept racial profiling, nor should they. We won't accept racism, nor should they. We won't accept systemic racism, nor should they. And we want rotten apples out of the barrel. And we just want good police officers left.
Right. So pardon me for interrupting when you said that appropriately, because two things. One of the major points I'm going to walk away with Black Lives Matter, I've always mattered, so it was never really a question for me. I never thought I'd see a day in America, and even though this was a horrific experience, the George Floyd era, because this is not just about George Floyd, because these incidences happen more often than not, is I got to see everybody say Black Lives Matter. I got to see white people say Black Lives Matter. I got to see Hispanic people say Black Lives Matter. And then some people will say, well, no, Black lives don't matter, all lives matter. But as an educator, they're synonyms to me, right? There's just no way that you can have Black Lives Matter because all lives matter. There's just no way that you can have all lives matter and not have Black Lives Matter, right? To me, they're synonyms, right? If I say Black Lives Matter, you say all lives matter. As far as I'm concerned, you're telling me the same thing, because under the umbrella of all lives matter, Black lives matter, white lives matter, Hispanic lives matter. So having said that, you mentioned the rotten apple. Your job is difficult on many levels, on many, multi-dimensionally is difficult, because how are you able to psychologically evaluate who you hire? Because once you hire them, you train them, but you will never be able to fully predict how they perform on the street. Right? So my guess is in Minneapolis, whoever hired Derek, I don't think they would have predicted Derek would have behaved that way, because there are some psychological values that we come into in a professional atmosphere that you may or may not be able to see at the door. So how do you account for that? How do you limit the folks that are probably biased deep within their bones, but they pass all of your training and all of your hoops to become a cop?
So poignant. I'm so on the same page as you. To the sports fans out there listening in, we have something called the NFL draft, the Major League Baseball draft, the NBA draft, hockey, and we have first-round draft choices all the time go to the Hall of Fame, and we have first-round draft choices never play a day of pro baseball. We have people who don't get drafted called free agents go to the Hall of Fame. We have free agents that, wash out. You can't predict. There's no crystal ball. You can't predict a person's heart and their mind. I told you at the beginning of this conversation that I was a Fort Lauderdale police officer in 1979. I remember as a young white Fort Lauderdale police officer handling complaints, whatever it be, in the homes of white people who might have been victimized, and they would have children. And you'd go in there and you'd say, who is the suspect? Or describe the suspect for the police report. And if they said the suspect was African American, not all the time and not a lot, but you would hear the most heinous racial remarks that, you just make your skin crawl, make you sick to your stomach. And I remember going out to the police car when the call was over and saying to myself, not thinking about the call, not thinking about the culprit or what happened, but just thinking about those little kids in this home, listening to what their parents were saying, and saying to myself, how could these kids be brought up and not be racist?
Right.
So before we start blaming schools and police departments and fire departments, we got to say, how has that child been brought up?
Right, because no one's born this way. Absolutely.
No, that's exactly right. So I think our backgrounds need to delve into go deeper into a person, earlier into a person's life, and ask questions about that. But there's nothing scientific. There's nothing you and I, if when I become sheriff and when we hopefully start the civilian complaint review board and you become part of it, we're going to do a good job together and we're going to make progress. But if you think we're going to eliminate bad cops, it's just never going to happen. Right. The reason is the pool of people we take cops from. We take cops from the human race, and humans are fallible people.
Yeah, we all have our respective biases, unfortunately. Okay, so let's talk about another elephant in the room. We haven't even spoken about COVID yet, right? Let's talk about Channel 10. So recently, you had an interview with Defeaty. And there was
Putney.
Sorry, Putney. I apologize, Putney. And there was an interesting exchange. Please, because the community wants to know. It's out there. So I would be remiss if we would not talk about what happened at the interview.
Well, it was supposed to be a debate. I think it was the second or third debate. Greg Tony didn't have the gumption and didn't want to be in the same room with me to listen to me talk about his character or lack thereof and question him. So we went on separately. I went on first. I was interviewed first. It was, I don't remember anything extraordinary about the interview. I answered everything honestly. I thought I did a good job. I was well prepared. And then Greg Tony went on and I think he lost his composure. He showed, his makeup. And the community is just turning away from it.
There's a cloud out there about someone in your campaign using a particular language, and so would you like to address that, please?
Sure, I would. There was a member of the campaign team that used the N-word on a video.
We're not talking about November. We're not talking about November.
When I heard about it, I called the person up. He said right away, he used it. He's African American, and that's up for people. I have an incredibly amount of Hispanic, Caribbean, and African American friends, and most of the African American friends I have told me that there's a difference when an African American uses the word. It's a terrible word. It's unacceptable. But there's a difference when an African American uses it speaking to another African American as opposed to a white person speaking to it. So it was used by an African American. We talked for less than a minute, and he said he was going to resign. He said he didn't want this to have anything to do with the campaign. I went on, I gave a statement. I said it was unacceptable. It won't, happen under my watch, and we move forward. That's it.
Okay. So I just want to share a little bit about context, and I don't know the details. I don't know how this word is used. And I can tell you, I have had to swallow my tongue over the years in my classroom, because being a teacher in Broward County means that I have students of all ethnic categories. And when I first got here as a teacher in Miami and in Broward County, I saw kids, I've seen Black kids call Black kids the N-word. I've seen Hispanic kids call Hispanic kids the N-word. And I've even seen white kids call white kids the N-word. So context has a lot to do with the N-word. So I'm not necessarily sure we can fully understand how this person used it on your campaign and whether or not you can be villainized for it. So
let me just interrupt and to the listeners, because this is important. He didn't use it on the campaign. He was in his backyard on his own time, and he went on Facebook Live, and he was talking about a plethora of issues, and in describing some of the things about Greg, he used the word, and the word is, to me, it's a deplorable, unacceptable word, and I said that, and everybody in Broward County knows how I feel, and it's a non-issue.
Okay, so to be clear, this is somebody who used it on his own time in his own space, nothing to do with your campaign.
Nothing.
Okay, all right. So that's good for the public to know. That's good for the public to know. All right, now that we got that out the way, let's talk about real issues. Let's talk about COVID-19 and the impact on policing. What are your thoughts?
You have to be prepared. Leaders have to see around corners. One of the greatest skills a leader could have is to see around corners. You have to know that you're stockpiled in equipment. You have to, I always say to the public, I believe in education before incarceration. Teach, 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 teach. You don't come in and give your kids a test. And if your kids do well on a test on Friday, you give and they get 100. They didn't get that 100 on Friday. They got that 100 on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday by listening in class, being studious, and studying. That's how you get that. So we have to be prepared. We have to study. We have to read about what agencies were successful with COVID-19 and emulate things. We have to look at agencies like BSO that was unsuccessful with COVID-19 with Greg Tony and take those things away, and we'll learn what not to do. The hardest part, and I know this from talking to all these deputies I used to work with, the hardest part to get over of the whole thing is when BSO received the hand sanitizer. Greg Tony made a decision to keep the hand sanitizer and not distribute it to the people until he could put his name on it. And it would say Sheriff Greg Tony hand sanitizer. And I think that took a week to 10 days. It's not forgivable to the men and women of the agency. And they feel that, it impacted or could have impacted the loss of life. I'm not going to say that directly led to, the loss of life, but then we lost Deputy Shannon Bennett, our first, BSO's first loss, an incredible, great man. And we lost him to COVID. And the unions and the agency were so angry with Greg.
Yes, my condolences to the family. My condolences to the family.
Yeah, it's a great family. There's a pastor in the family. They're a wonderful family. But the agency turned on Greg, and he went out to the hospital where, when Shannon passed away, and yelled and screamed and just, belittled the agency because he was angry because they were criticizing him. And then he went on, when they took Shannon to the funeral parlor, he went out there and it got even worse, and he berated and yelled, and he's lost the agency. If I come over to you and I do a traffic stop with you, and you're real nasty, but I say, sir, please give me your wallet. Sir, here's why I'm stopping you. I have a chance to put you up. I have a chance to say, and we could have no conflict. But if I come up to you and
de-escalation.
Yes, de-escalation. That's what we were all about, de-escalation. And there's no de-escalation. There was no de-escalation in Tamarack with DeLuca Roll. It was escalation. And for Greg to come in here, and I said this on the Putney Show, for Greg to come in here like he's the knight in shining armor to prevent, he's going to stop police brutality like his ridiculous commercials say. He brought police brutality by saying, we're going to do martial arts training. The nickname the men and women of the agency gave when they were told they were going to train in martial arts and get punched and fought? They called it ground and pound. And captains had a meeting with him and they said, hey, please stop this. He said, these are my deputies. We'll do what I want to do. And a month later, DeLuca Roll was pounded into the pavement. And anybody who's ever played a sport before knows you play as you practice. And the union filed a grievance. I actually have the grievance right here. And it says, Jeff Bell, president of the Broward Sheriff's Deputy Association, said that the self-defense training that Tony installed was so aggressive that the union had to file a grievance. He said deputies suffered concussions, broken bones, and even a brain bleed. The deputies did exactly what they were trained to do. Bell said the deputies were implementing aggressive police tactics that the new sheriff has pushed. And, a new sheriff who had very little experience, a sergeant for a year on the midnight shift in Coral Springs, a little small city. And he goes from having 4 subordinates and now almost 6,000. It's a recipe for disaster, and it's been a disaster.
Where is Chef Bell today? He's another person I would love to interview to see where he is in terms of his thoughts and his ideas. Do you know?
I don't know, I haven't had conversation with him, but he was suspended pending an IA investigation. The union believes that Greg didn't like him speaking up, and to stop him from speaking up, he suspended him, and I guess it's in court, and I don't know much about it. But.
Would you, being sheriff at this point in time, getting back to COVID-19, will you require cops to wear masks on the road?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. And what is the connection? And this is something that's even bigger and just as important, because I also participate in this as well. And never, coming from a third world country, I never thought I'd see a day in America where folks are actually in line for food. What is the connection with BSO and food drives? What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are there. I brought him. I actually brought him here. Best thing that could ever have happened. I partnered with a man named Wayne Barton, a former police officer in Palm Beach County, who now has a food ministry. Wonderful man. And Wayne and I together have brought over 5 million pounds of food. Not only when I was sheriff, but we've continued these grocery giveaways since I was sheriff. And when you, and I'm glad you spoke about a third world country, because when we in America think of hunger, we think of third world countries. But we got people in Broward County.
Never thought I'd see that. I saw that in Cooper City. In Cooper City, lines of people waiting for food. God, please forgive me, but I never thought I'd see that in the United States of America.
Absolutely. And as a school teacher, I know this is your interview, but I ask you this: would you want to teach a child who comes to your class without breakfast?
They're not gonna learn anything.
Of course not.
They're not gonna learn anything.
Of course not. And we gave turkeys away, and so many people, Republicans and critics, critics would criticize me, but as Teddy Roosevelt said, it's not the critic who counts. It's the man whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, and is in the arena and won't be marked with a timid soul and knows neither victory nor defeat. So, critics don't bother me. We brought food to people. We fed people, and the love. And when you, first of all, I was given a blessing by God to be a sheriff of Broward County. And with that power comes responsibility. And it's my job now to help other people. And we did. And in helping other people, that's community policing. Because when you give $300, $400 worth of food to someone on a weekend and they leave, when that little boy or that girl comes to school with a handgun, or there's a shooting on their street, they're going to say, BSO, I'm going to be partners with them. They might take a cop to his side. They might give information. They might call me up or might call another deputy up and tell us what's going on. So when you gain people's trust and you're able to help people eat, I mean, the objective is to give food to people. But if there's a collateral benefit of now you're creating a relationship where people are going to want to call and help, how great is that?
Right. Okay, so as we wrap up, okay, we have to talk about just a few things, and I'd like to give you the opportunity to make a closing statement, and so will I. Independent of Parkland, and just to let you know, there are quite a few people with us in the room, and there have been people who are saying lots of words of encouragement, and there are some also people who have some questions as well. Independent of Parkland, to the best of your knowledge, what other criticisms do you believe you face from the public? Because no one's perfect. There's got to be something. There's got to be something. For example, I saw something earlier from Sandy Bea. Sandy Bea said something about, it's further up. Was asking something about hiring friends. What did she? She wrote something about hiring friends. I don't know necessarily.
I don't know. If I know the lady, the name doesn't ring a bell. But what I think I'm pretty sure she's implying is being a Fort Lauderdale police officer. And this is a great. I can't even tell you what a blessing it is to be on this show and have this conversation. And I mean that. But when I won the sheriff's race in 2012, I had to build a command staff.
Right.
90% of that command staff looked like me, not you. I needed to bring diversity to that command staff. I believe that when a community looks in at a policing agency, they should feel like they're looking in the mirror, that they see
Right.
themselves. We should look like Broward County.
I agree.
So we needed changes, and I wasn't going to be saddled with Al Lamberti's command staff. Obama wasn't saddled with Bush's command staff. Trump didn't take Obama's. We as leaders, when we have a right and a responsibility to build our own cabinets of people we trust, people that we want. So I brought people over from Fort Lauderdale and other places. We brought people in from Hollywood, from Palm Beach County. So we built a command staff, a very, very successful command staff. And then critics would say, you brought people in, in from Fort Lauderdale. And Greg Tony would say, well, I didn't bring anybody in, from that are friends in. Well, first of all, that's one of his 700 lies. First person he hired was a sergeant he worked with, a white sergeant he heard with Coral Springs, who was in South Carolina, who had a military background, and he brought him in as the undersheriff, not Nicole Anderson. And he gave a huge contract to the Coral Springs police officer who retired, who was a Coral Springs police chief who retired, who was his consultant. The chief left him, the undersheriff left him, and then he went on to make these promotions. But this command staff where he promoted, I promoted all of these people. There's not one person he promoted that I hadn't promoted 1, 2, or 3 times. When I got over there, as I said, 90% of the leaders were white like me. So I made, I went and African Americans, Caribbean Americans, people from the LGBT community, Hispanics, we made them sergeants and lieutenants and captains. So these individuals were now in a prime place to be promoted. He said, well, I didn't promote these people. Well, I had a command staff in place that he fired. So there were no positions for them. It's like a football coach leaves, the staff goes with you, and then you bring in your own staff.
You also wonderfully, pardon me for interrupting, you also wonderfully brought in people from the Muslim community as well. So I support that. So
I did do that. And
I support that.
And an incredible Muslim leader. So I'm proud of that too. We got to look like Broward County. Who better to solve a problem in a Muslim community than a Muslim police officer who came from that community?
Absolutely.
It's just common sense.
Absolutely. Okay, so we can talk forever, and I actually look forward to talking to you a little bit more. Now, let's just say, this is just for my personal question. I'm curious. Let's just say the universe answers your plan and your hopes, and you are sheriff on August 18th. What does your first day of work look like?
Well, it wouldn't be August 18th because I got to go. We have to go on. Whoever wins the Democrat, right. So November.
That's right.
My first day of work is, meeting people, talking to command staff. Obviously there are going to be some changes, not radical changes and everything like that, but obviously my staff isn't going to look the same as Greg Tony's staff. So getting staff in place, and then starting off a series of interviews that may go on for 30 days, 60 days, but talking to people and find out what went wrong, what went wrong since I left. Maybe by accident, Greg might have even done something right. So if he did, I want to keep those things in place. But I think there's so much mistrust, and to have, and the story, and if you wanted me to expound upon it, I will. But Greg is being investigated as we have this conversation by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement for falsification on his application. And there are people who tell you, rightfully so, that if Greg would have been truthful in his applications, he never would have been sheriff, and he couldn't even be a police officer because of the LSD usage anywhere in the United States of America. So now you hear all the time, just about every third phone call I get, how is he going to be able to discipline somebody on the agency who's untruthful or doesn't tell the truth on a report when he has this history of lying on these applications? And, just about, so there's so much mistrust, and I have to go over there, and you have to tread lightly, and you have to rebuild people's psyche and build the right teams and put the right leaders in place and put round plugs in round holes. And that's what the first day is going to look like, a very, very, very hectic day. And then, of course, I'll meet with, the entire agency, as many people as possible. And
When would that first day be, hypothetically?
I think it would be January 4th, maybe.
Okay,
But
so-
I know we're pressed for time, but I wanted to tell you, one of the first speeches I gave to command staff when I became the sheriff in 2013 is I remember saying this. I said, we are not going to call alcoholics, people addicted to narcotics, mentally ill people, and homeless people. We're not going to call them problem people anymore. We're going to refer to them as people with very real problems that can be fixed. And I gave $350,000 to a project that the incredible commissioner out in Miramar, Barbara Sharif, was working on. I give her so much credit for that. She did a homeless management identification system, and we paid a great deal of that, and it was a mutual type project, and it helped. But I'm going to have this speech when I go back in January of 2021, and I don't know everything I'm going to say, but as I said about homeless people and alcoholics and people addicted to narcotics not being problem people, the agency is going to be told by me, Black Lives Matter. And that's how we're going to approach it. And people are going to understand Black Lives Matter. And we are going to make sure that we have an incredible relationship with our communities, that our communities trust us. And I'll be, it's not going to be for others to do. I'll be taking the lead on that. I'll be the focal point of that, because the agency is going to be reflected in the actions of the leader. And this community is going to welcome me back, and you'll see by the vote.
Right. I am going to ask you for a favor, though, and this is probably a little quid pro quo, but if and when you're sheriff, right, I'm going to make it my duty to have a conversation with Robert Runcie about bringing your world and my world a little bit closer, right? Because I would like kids to learn more about law enforcement. I would like kids to know their rights. I would like to decrease the fear. I don't think anybody should walk in fear of the police, right? I think we ought to have a partnership, maybe even a friendship, a better understanding. I would like for more programs for young people to understand what happens in BSO and to feel safer. And I'd like for you to come back to the Broward Social Network so we can talk to the people again. Maybe I'm asking for too much because you're going to be incredibly busy. So.
Well, it is an incredibly busy job, but you're not asking for too much, and it's symbiotic in nature. It's going to help you, and it's going to help your students, and it's going to help us, and it's going to help keep kids out of jail, and it's a mutual endeavor. But I will tell you this: I went to Piper High School years ago, and I was asked to go there for career day. And I was leaving career day, and a single mom, African-American woman, she came over there and she said, I wanted to ask you a question about my son. So I thought, the way she approached me, I thought we went to talk privately, and I thought, Ted, that she was going to ask me that her son might have had some alcohol issues or narcotics issues, or how could I help her son maybe getting into a program or something. So that's what I was expecting. Well, boy, did she rock my world. She said, Sheriff, how do I teach my son, if he gets stopped by police in a traffic stop, how to come home alive and not die? That's just how she said it. You could have pushed me over with a feather. And I said, and she explained that to me. So I went back to so many of our high schools and talked to so many of our students about how to act on the encounter. How do you act when faced with a police officer who's not being respectful, who he's not acting the way he or she should be acting? How do you act? And we went over that, and I think I helped. I hope I helped a lot of folks.
Those conversations cannot stop. They cannot be once in a while. Those conversations have to keep on going, because every single parent, probably more so than ever, but every single parent has that idea on their minds about the kids coming home and their safety, whether or not they're going to get shot by law enforcement, police brutality. Every parent, it's probably been there forever. It's probably happening at this moment. However, it's been on the media in high definition for us to see. So therefore, those conversations need to continue to have. Now, I'm not necessarily in a rush, and there is another question I have for you, and this is really for the sake of the public to understand. Are you able to talk a little bit about the Promise Program, what it is, what it wasn't, whether or not you support it, whether you don't support it? How is it that it's connected to all of this?
I could tell you what I know about it. I'm not the person to speak to. It's a school. It's your program. You know,
Right.
It's a Runcie school board program. It's not a Broward Sheriff's program.
Right.
I am the first. There were only 2 law enforcement officials that signed on to support the Promise program. I was one, and Frank Adderley, the former chief of Fort Lauderdale, was the other. We were the only 2 law enforcement heads to sign on to the Promise program. I do support the Promise program, and I don't believe that a child should have misdemeanor problems in a school and should be arrested. It's been clear, crystal clear in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Commission that people want to criticize what happened in Parkland but not read the report. And it's been crystal clear that the Promise program had nothing to do with what happened there. And are we going to throw away a program and give and prevent children, 90% who are Black or brown, from having the opportunity to stay out of jail and not get into the system because they have a minor issue at the school? So I can't talk about the specifics or the ramifications. I've said everything I can say, you know, or I know about it, but I do support the program.
Awesome. Okay, so in summary, I'd like for you to be able to reach out, dig deep, and say your words to the public 1 week before the election. Some people have already made up their minds. Some people are making up their minds. A lot of people are going to vote on the 18th, 1 week before the election. I'd like for you to go ahead and look into the eyes of the public and tell them your thoughts.
So to those who out there who have already voted for me or know they're going to vote for me, from the bottom of my heart, I say thank you. I appreciate you, and I'm humbled. When someone gives you a donation to your campaign, you know, you say thank you. But when a man or woman stop you on the street and they tell you they voted for you, you're just humbled by that. It's I can't explain it unless it's happened to you, and I never get tired of hearing that. So truly, thank you. For those of you who might be undecided, we had so many accomplishments as an agency. We diversified the agency. I hired more African Americans than any sheriff ever. We brought body cameras to the Broward Sheriff's Office so you could see what happened. We supported the Promise program. I made the civil citation program mandatory to keep young kids out of jail. We treated the homeless and mentally ill with dignity and respect. I made officers go through the crisis intervention training so they could be better prepared to deal with a mentally ill patient. And we were reelected by 600,000 votes. Your vote was stolen. For the students that are going to listen to this, the little history you might want to look up if you don't know the name Medgar Evers. Medgar Evers was the field secretary of the NAACP in 1963, and he was assassinated outside his home. What was his crime? He was trying to get African Americans the right to vote, and he was gunned down by racists. You take your right to vote. You only are able to vote because we have soldiers that have died all over this world, men and women who've died all over this world, keeping us a free nation and giving us the right to vote. So your right to vote is critically important. I think I deserve your vote. Being a sheriff is about trust. I've been in law enforcement over 40 years. I'm a graduate of the FBI National Academy. I rose through the ranks, never a scandal, never a discipline. In all my years of police work, I've never been disciplined. Well, I'll get into that in a second. The person that the governor put in there now forgot to disclose that he shot and killed a teenager, just completely forgot about it, left it off the application, never told the governor about it. Went for a job in 2004 with the Tallahassee Police Department. This is mind-boggling, and admitted to doing LSD, admitted to it. And he was disqualified from the process because if you've done LSD, it's a hallucinogenic drug and you can have flashbacks. So Greg Toney was disqualified. What does he do? Every other application he's ever filled out, he's lied about his LSD usage. And now he's being investigated by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. He's taking credit for the real-time crime center I started, the training center I started. He basically took an ingredient out of my agency, put a little ingredient of his in, I'm putting new on the can and calls it New Coke when the old Coke was better. And that's how we're going back. You know, said he was the answer to police brutality. You heard what Jeff Bell said. You heard what I read. He brought this pounding, ground beating, pounding MMA training. And that's what happened. These deputies got out of the car and responded to the training they were being taught. And to everybody, I don't believe there's a person watching this who doesn't know somebody that's in jail for a crime they didn't commit, or punished for something they didn't do. And, you know, that's who I am. Suspended, my livelihood taken from me. And as the Dudley Goodlett said, put the sheriff back to work. But there were more Republicans in Tallahassee. A Republican conspiracy took place. And here I am suspended, but we're on the verge of going back in. And I'm asking for, you know, for your support. There's no self-pity. You know, and I'll leave with, you know, I'm a child of God and very important to me. And to everyone out there, I'll say this. Joseph was bounded into slavery by his own brothers, not by other people, by his own brothers, and put in prison and was living an absolutely horrific life. And then he became, I believe, the second or third most powerful person in Egypt. And what scripture tells us is what man means for evil, God could turn into good. So God will turn this into good. On next Tuesday, we'll win the Democratic primary. I love being your sheriff. I want to be your sheriff again. I want to face those challenges, and I want to do the things that we've done together. COVID is for real. I had it. Thank the good Lord. I'm negative. Protect your children. Don't let them go out with this invincible attitude. Take care of each other. God bless and stay safe. Mr. Victor, thank you for having me on the show tonight.
Well, there you have it, social media land. This is probably the last interview with Scott Israel before you vote. You decide who is going to be your sheriff next week, Tuesday, August the 18th. I do believe that you ought to exercise your right to vote. We have fought hard and died for it. Some of us have died for it. Do not stay home. I ask you that you share this message with all of your friends. I'm not telling you who to vote for. However, I'm asking you to vote. And I believe that you're going to make the best choice for our county, because this is the most important seat in the county. It is the seat who's going to determine our safety. Mr. Israel, it's been a pleasure and an honor to have you on this network. And I thank everyone who has seen this, who is going to see this, and who is going to share this. Please continue to share this with all of your community members, your family members, and have a conversation. Come together, have a voting party to be able to just come out. And if somebody is in a wheelchair next door, please either give them a paper ballot, a mail-in ballot, or give them a ride to the polls, because this is important. And I do believe that the people are going to make the right choice for this county. And I really sincerely thank you for your time. I think you are an incredible person, Scott Israel. I don't know who's going to win next week. Regardless, with or without the vote of the people, me, Ted Victor, I think you're an awesome individual. I think you're an upstanding individual. And I look forward to continuing to work with you in the future in any capacity possible.
Roger that. Thank you.
Yes. You have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much, and the best of luck.
Take care.
Thank you. Good night.